Well, hello. Week 6 of the General Assembly, and we want to give you an update. Last week was a little rough week. David was out with the flu, and
unfortunately,
I was downtown most of the time and trying to get back in time to do some of these things. So we spent the week down there this week, and we worked with the General Assembly to advance some things, and we had a interesting meeting today with Senator Surovell.
Yes, indeed. So regarding his bill, Senate Bill 917, we met with Senator Surovell. We wanted to make you a little clip, but we didn't have a chance to make a video.
Yeah, we tried to convince him to allow us to tape our conversation so that you could see it, but he was somewhat resistant to that.
Mm-hmm.
And but we wanted to meet with him because his bill was up this afternoon in Labor and Commerce, and explain to him why we're opposed to having the state police in it. And we did it in a way that we shared with him the research that we've done on this. And
Mm-hmm.
and David and I have been looking at this for some time since it came out, and we just didn't oppose it just out of the blue. We've done some research. We've talked to people. We've looked at the evidence, and the county Fairfax that he serves is one of the counties that has collective bargaining and has since 2021, I think.
Yeah, Fairfax, Arlington, Loudoun, Portsmouth, and Richmond, I believe, are the 5 that have enacted it.
And that is after the legislation allowed localities the option to do it, and only 5 localities.
Yeah, important to point out that only 5 have done it.
And when we looked at the numbers, I mean, we looked at what Fairfax has accomplished since collective bargaining, and it was astounding. They have a critical employee
They're down
shortage.
200 officers as of July of last year.
And their pay is not, our advocacy over the years have outpassed their pay, and they're the richest county in the country. That they could pay their people more.
And so what it boils down to is starting pay, according to Fairfax's website, we just looked at this week, $65 and some change. Now they can get 5% for college, 5% for foreign language. There's a whole litany of things that they could get additional 5% for if they're applicable. But we compared their starting pay to what a Trooper 1 out of the academy with a 24% adjustment.
Right.
They would be at 72.
Right.
And then 1 year in at Trooper 2, they'd be at 78.
So you're 20% higher than what a Fairfax County police officer is with collective bargaining.
Yes.
And so we brought that to his attention, and he kind of dismissed it in the fact that, well, it's just the contractual arguments and so forth like that. But then we went into the fact that he brought up on the floor that the state police needed collective bargaining because they have no advocates. And we explained to him that we've been around for 50 years and that Wayne Huggins before me had been there, and we had advocated for things. And he acknowledged that Wayne had worked with him on several key issues, and that I had worked with him during my time in the General Assembly. And yet he reverts back to the fact that you need collective bargaining.
Right.
And
he even referenced some information from 2015 in terms of how to fund it, right? Because we know that there's going to have to be a funding source,
and he knows
in order to pay for it, right?
Right.
And he referred back with making reference to where it came from. And Bill, let him know where everybody know where that actually came from.
Yeah, he referred back to a 2015 presentation by the state police on the amount of population growth and highway traveled miles of the increase of vehicles on the highway. And where that information come from, and he was a little set back when I brought it in, because that information came from Senate Bill 754 in 2015, introduced by me. And the study was in conjunction with what Wayne Huggins and I and the department worked out on the number of troopers that would need to be added to the agency over a 10-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And it would start when funds were collected. It would start in 2017 and it would end in 2027. And it would have added 625 new troopers, sworn positions to the Department of State Police. It would have added 111 civilian personnel to the state police, and it would increase the registration each year over that 10-year period by $1.25. And in the 10th year, it'd be $12.50 total that it would have added to that registration fee. And the total amount that it would have generated in revenue for the state police, because it was set up in a public safety trust fund, would have been around $110 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have funded the state police's compression issue, pay issue, 625 sworn members. And he was really kind of caught off guard when I said, you're the majority leader. Your party has the majority now. You're concerned about the image that you got about defunding the police. This is yours. Introduce it. You have the authority to do it. I laid the groundwork. You can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no indication that he wanted to do that.
But most importantly, what that would have provided was an independent funding source,
a stream
for the state police.
That you didn't have to go back every time,
right,
and ask for the money,
and which is something that we've advocated for over and over again. And maybe it would put us on par with, the likes of ABC,
right?
And we
ABC starting pay at $72,000,
right, a full 14,000 more than where we're at right now, or more.
Right.
For
that's across the
pay.
state. That's not including the increase in Northern Virginia.
And in the intervening years, it's important to point out what it really related to in 2015. But in the intervening years, from 2015 to today, there have been a multitude of pay increases. And there
is a study that was done that year that showed other states used this method to do that. So we're not reinventing the wheel. It's already been done in other states, because there's a nexus between what highway safety and the job that the trooper does on the highway to promote highway safety and registration, and it frees up the ability to do all the integral things that we do as a state police agency, and that we do well. And that was the reason I said, you're really creating a very complicated situation if you include the state police into collective bargaining with all of these other state agencies, because our job is unique and volatile when it comes to investigating state agencies. Criminal and corruption. It is important that we remain unbiased,
yes, and objective,
and objective in those investigations. But then you're putting us in a class with every state agency as a collective bargaining agent, and now they'll be biased in that investigation, and that 3-member panel will have the power to discipline, demote, promote, transfer,
fire.
And it makes it very difficult. He did acknowledge that our work there was important, but he kept referring back to the need for collective bargaining. He wasn't going to relent on his bill for collective bargaining because someone has his ear to push collective bargaining forward. So that was where we stood. But moving from that to the budget, we've been waiting to hear who the conferees will be, because each body will reject the other body's budget. And
because where we're at between the two bills, Senate Bill 917 and House Bill 2764, is there are slight differences. 917 is silent with respect to sheriff's deputies, where 2764 specifically excludes sheriff's deputies, which is interesting because not all law enforcement, one of the things he wanted to stress to us, Senator Surovell wanted to stress to us today is that they really do support the police, that they're not against us. They don't want to defund. He doesn't want to defund us, which is interesting. We'll make a note on that point in just a moment when we get to our budget amendments for the pay chart increase. But that he does support it, but yet he excludes a large class, all the sheriff's deputies,
Capitol Police,
and a whole host of other employees, employees of constitutional officers, legislative employees, and so maybe well-meaning, but that's the difference between the two bills. That's the first difference. The second difference is Senate Bill 917 would keep the grievance procedure process the same for all state employees, where 2764 creates a different grievance procedure process that would fall under the collective bargaining board.
Right.
And so they're going to have to hash out those two things in conference in order to come up with a final bill that represents whatever the General Assembly is going to pass in terms of collective bargaining.
And I think it should be noted that we've even spoken to the governor about our concerns about this. Mm-hmm. We read an open letter that was put out by an organization about their support for it, but everything in that open letter contradicts exactly what this bill does. Yes. And so, we explained to the governor why, his chief of staff, why we think it's bad for the state police to be involved in that, and that, we've always been a non-political, unbiased investigative arm of the state, mm-hmm. and that we really need to remain that way, mm-hmm. and that we feel that our best advocacy is with the legislators one-on-one. And Delegate Kilgore alluded to that when we did his interview, because he basically said, if I support this, then my troopers can't come to me in my area that vote for me and tell me their problems.
They have to go to the bargaining unit.
Chance to fix it. They go to the bargaining unit. And, when I look at this, it's almost a way for the legislators to say, we don't want to talk to you anymore. Yeah. Go to your bargaining agent, let them work it out.
And that will not be part of the process.
And we'll decide then if there's money to fund it, because they all know under Article 10 of the Constitution, they can't spend more than they bring in.
Right.
So they either got to raise taxes, and because local employees are involved in it, locally and by state.
Yeah.
And they'll raise these taxes, and it'll be like northern states.
Is really interesting, because that's how the conversation was full circle with Senator Surovell. And that is, we know we got to have this solution. The solution is the funding.
Right.
The funding piece has been available and known to him. He referenced it in his floor speech.
Yep. We've laid it all out for you on a silver platter.
This is what you need to do. Fund us, make it whole, make it sustainable, and then we will be in a great position going forward,
right?
Even without collective bargaining,
right? So we've tried to get him to understand. I think he does understand. He just is dug his heels in on collective bargaining, and he, for some reason, feels like the state police has to be a part of it, even though there's other agencies exempt from it.
Sure,
and which leads us to the other conversation about his comment about they don't want to be known as defunding the police. And I explained to him, Scott, we've never said that to you. We've never said that you're defunding the police. And as a matter of fact, Ralph Northam was the one who introduced the budget that had the compression pay in it.
That's exactly right.
And now Governor Youngkin signed it. Mm-hmm. But it was there. They initiated it.
They funded the 48
and we
million.
gave them the credit for that.
Right.
And we appreciate that. But in the same sense, he sits on finance. Mm-hmm. So introducing the bill would be no problem. he's the majority leader. He runs the floor. He runs the majority Senate, the Senate majority. And I explained to him, in the House budget, the $3.3 million, which was in the governor's budget to address pay compression in the pay chart so that it doesn't get compressed.
That would be the 1.4%.
That's the 1.4%. It was in the governor's budget introduced. The House left it, didn't change it, yet they reduced it.
Yeah, the Senate reduced it.
The Finance Committee that he sits on.
Yes.
And he chairs local government. So it was
where
reduced.
It went through.
And he reduced it. It was reduced to $2.5 million.
For targeted compression.
Right.
Whatever that means. We don't know exactly how that will apply.
The only thing that we can figure out when we look at that is that it'll allow compression pay to be funded up to a certain point till the next governor is elected, and then it'll be addressed by that next governor.
Right.
The House version takes it through to July 1st, and then the next governor will decide that from July 1st forward. But that goes back to if you don't want to think that you're defunding the police, why did you reduce it? Right. And he alluded that he wasn't aware that it was reduced. And so, we explained to him how important that is. And so we've been able to articulate our position on why, not just that we're opposing collective bargaining, but why we're opposing collective bargaining, and why. You get the impression that they're defunding us because of these situations that occur.
Yes.
And so one of the other things in the budget that we wanted to make sure you knew is both the House and Senate versions and the governor's had the funding for the 6th Division headquarters and the academy.
Yeah, right.
And so those should be pretty safe, but we never know what will happen in conference. And then the budget amendments that Jennifer Carroll Foy introduced.
Yeah, and those two budget amendments that we spoke about before, one was for a 9.3% pay increase for dispatchers, and we offered that, and there was a companion amendment for the dispatchers for the sheriff's offices, and but unfortunately that budget amendment was laid on the table. And it will not be going forward. And likewise, with the other budget amendment that Carol Foy offered for us was the enhanced hazard duty pay. And now that would have taken it to $1,800 and then $2,200 in successive years.
It would have been $1,407 that it currently is to $1,800 the first year. Instead, this year it will go to $1,488, but it would have taken it to $1,800. And then in the second year, $2,200.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that failed as well.
That didn't get a hearing, as we've seen a lot of bills.
It's been a huge problem in a challenging environment.
Very challenging.
At this General Assembly, probably one of the most challenging, certainly for me.
And I've been there for 20-some years, and it is the most challenging one I've ever been in because there's just no conversation, no debate,
nothing in terms of what they didn't want to hear.
Right, and not even wanting to see you. Surovell was 35, 40 minutes late to the meeting that we held, which cut our meeting short, so we didn't have a real robust debate as much as we wanted to have. And, we really was hoping that he would allow us to tape it so you could just see the way his body language.
But we put a ton of effort especially into the dispatcher issue because we know that there's a real issue there. Exactly. And so, and we will continue the advocacy in that regard for both of those things because both of them are very, very important.
Yeah, let me mention that hazard duty supplement part real quick. By getting the budget amendment in this year, it gives us the ability to start this conversation that what your cost of living increase is getting you to isn't keeping up with what healthcare cost is.
Right.
So though we knew we probably wouldn't get $1,800 or $2,200, we gave it a range to where we could have a negotiation period. But because they didn't even want to have a conversation about it, it didn't get us to that point.
Right.
And hopefully next year, now that we've put it before them, next year when we go back, we can really have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're trying to get to. We're trying to get that increased enough to where it offsets a lot of the healthcare issues that you have to pay your healthcare moving forward.
Right. Our last item in terms of legislation was Senate Bill 781. Again, Jennifer Carroll Foy, Senator, carried that for us. And we've talked about that already through our videos. And the companion bill, House Bill 1874.
Delegate Henson.
This is the Protection of Personal Information bill. And essentially it will allow an officer or retiree in this case under Senate Bill 781 and House Bill 1874 to petition the court to protect that information. And it doesn't fully cover the full scope. In fact, you had a conversation with a Commonwealth attorney.
After the bill was passed and on the floor, I had a meeting with Commonwealth Attorneys Association member who we were discussing this bill, and they brought it up. What kind of bills did you all have? And we explained to it, and I gotten a call or an email from a member who has utilized this.
Yeah. And
they were telling me that, even though your address and so forth is redacted from it, your name is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So with that conversation by our member, which we advocate for our members when they contact us and ask us to do things like this, that conversation led to, well, next year, let's come back and let's assign a code to that instead of a name.
Yeah.
Which then allows all that information to be gone, because now, even though your house address is redacted,
your name is still there. They have a good idea where to look.
Yeah,
good idea where to look.
They know where to go, what county to go.
Yeah, and so I'm hopeful about that, and we will address that. And that bill did exceedingly well, unanimous on both sides.
Right.
And it's headed over to the governor's mansion for consideration of the signature. So that's pretty much where we are for week 6, Bill.
Week 7 is the last week of the General Assembly. It is scheduled to adjourn on the 22nd, I think it is, or whatever the last day.
Really close to there.
Yeah, 22nd. And once they adjourn, then they'll be gone for 6 weeks. They'll come back for what they call reconvene session, or some refer to it as veto session.
Yeah.
And that's when the governor makes all of his amendments to everything that they've done. He vetoes whatever he sees fit to veto. We've had conversations with him about our issues. We've advocated with the governor on the pay issues. He knows what we need. He knows where we stand on all these issues that we talk about. But week 7 will be a very busy week, so we hope to get a video out to you on adjournment. We will have a couple more. I know that Delegate Mike Cherry's scheduled to do an interview with us next week. Delegate Nick Rush, we're trying to get another. We probably will have a sit down with Senator Aaron Rouse, who has announced that he's running for Lieutenant Governor. We're actually working on a meeting with Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears. So we'll share those videos as we get them, but their schedule is so compact right now, trying to get all this done in this next week, that it's just hard to get a time to set up and do the conversation video. But thank you for listening. Hopefully you'll have a great weekend, no more snow, and brace yourself for next week as we hear that snow will be coming back in.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.